Chris Williamson and James Smith just built a $60 million business. 2 rounds of investment, celebrity backers, all for an energy drink that's barely 2 years old. But that valuation didn't come from what's actually in the cans. It came from the people that are drinking it. I don't even know where the fuck that went. I'm going to break down what they actually built, why investors paid so much for it, and how you can apply the same mechanism to your own business. So a couple months back, Newtonic went from a $20 million valuation up to 60 mil and received a $6 million cash injection. I bought a couple of cases on launch day. I've been a fan of Newtonic products for a while now, but like I drink the energy drink because I like energy drinks. But it hasn't been like a groundbreaking, life-changing thing for me. But it doesn't matter because like I said, it's not what's in the can that makes the business worth so much money, but I'm going to explain what does. That $6 million didn't come from the ingredients that go into making Newtonic what it is. That cash came from the investors making a bet on the audience that these guys had built over years before this product was actually launched. Now you might be asking what makes a social media following worth 60 mil? Well, it comes down to 3 things. The first point is the foundation of everything. It's the fact that the audiences that these guys built have the problem that their products actually aim to solve. This is where a lot of businesses go completely wrong. They try to build the biggest audience possible, but then get confused when only a tiny fraction show any interest in their product. Having a huge audience feels great for the ego, but as my missus likes to tell me, size isn't everything. And I believe that. The audience you actually want to build is made up of people that actually have problems that you have the ability to solve. They're the ones that you should be focused on trying to reach and then eventually sell to. The second layer to all of this is your audience identifies as the type of person that uses your product. When someone buys a productivity drink like Newtonic, they're not just looking for a caffeine hit. They're buying something that complements the way they see themselves. They might be someone who cares a lot about their productivity, their self-improvement. They're looking to get things done and achieve something, and they see Newtonic as a way to help with that. And the third layer is the audience trusts the source of recommendation. And this is trust that was built over years through the delivery of consistent value through the content that these guys produce. It wasn't just about one viral hit. It was about them showing up over and over again. When Chris is on a podcast and recommends his product and says this works, his audience is more likely to believe that because they've been listening to him for years already and they trust in his recommendation. Now, most creators build an audience that hits one of these 3 fundamentals, maybe 2, but these guys have hit all 3. And when you hit all 3, you're creating a very powerful brand. I believe it's successfully hitting those 3 elements that made their brand worth 60 mil. So how do you do the same thing for your business? So let's start with Chris Williamson. If you don't know who Chris Williamson is, he's the host of the Modern Wisdom podcast. He's been creating for years. I think it launched back in 2018. He's done over 1,000 episodes, showing up 3 times a week, every week. Been on Rogan. He's got thousands and thousands of hours of content out there for you to listen to. Now, I don't believe that Chris started the podcast with the intention of launching a productivity drink off the back of it. I believe he didn't aim for this. It just sort of come out of the blue, but the foundation was laid through the way that he approached building this audience from the start. And from Chris's perspective, there were 3 things that I believe made Newtonic the success that it was from his perspective. So the first thing is the format itself. Long form content, I believe, is the best way to build trust with your audience. When someone listens to hours of your content per week, they're no longer just looking at you as an entertainment source, right? They start to feel like they know who you are. They start to build a connection with you. It's a parasocial connection. You don't know them, but they feel like they know you. Short form content is great for reach, but it takes a lot longer for someone to develop that parasocial connection with you through short form content as opposed to long form content. It happens much faster and the depth of the relationship is much more substantial. Long form content is the most powerful way to build trust through content on social media. When an audience is listening to hours and hours of your content every week, you're no longer just a brand at that point. From their perspective, you're someone that they know. Now, you might never meet any of these people, but they feel like they know you and that they have some kind of connection with you, and that's what leads to trust. This is much harder to do with short form content because of the way people consume it. People are swiping on Instagram. It's going to take a lot more effort from your part, a lot more consistency to actually see that relationship start to form, whereas long form content happens much faster. The second element of Chris's content that made Newtonic a success was in how he actually shows up in his long form content. He doesn't come at things as an authority all the time. He comes at it as someone who's trying to learn something. So the people that are watching, they feel like they're going through the process with him. They feel like they're equal to him. He's not coming at them, talking at them and trying to teach them about something. They feel like he's a mate that's just going through the same process with them. And that's a huge advantage because that companion-based trust doesn't hinge on him being right about something. It just hinges on him being honest and relatable. So in a nutshell, his audience doesn't follow him because he's got the answers. They follow because he's actively looking for the same answers alongside them. And the third layer to all of this is just the topics that he actually talks about. The topics that he talks about on Modern Wisdom all kind of cluster around a specific set of topics. So it's like productivity, self-development, discipline. These are all things that are regularly covered on there. And then Chris himself talks about his own routines, his habits, what he reads, what supplements he takes, what he struggles with. Because the audience sees his content as something that's going to have solutions to the problems that they also have, by the time Nitonic comes along, it's an easy sell because he's already shown through his content that he's looking for the same outcomes that they are. So if there's a product that's created by him that could solve these problems, easy sell. So that's Chris Williamson. What about James Smith? Chris Williamson built his trust through depth through one major format. James Smith went wide across multiple formats, but he used brutal honesty to get his message across. So James Smith started out as a PT and he basically built his audience through debunking like all the bullshit in the industry. Talking about supplement companies that were scamming people, talking about fitness trends and bad information out there, calling out people that were giving bad advice. Brutal honesty. He was saying things that people in the industry just wouldn't say. And much like Chris Williamson, there were three sort of pieces to this that made it work really well. First thing was the anti-guru positioning. A lot of big fitness health creators were building their audience and their platform and making a lot of money off just selling information. Didn't matter if it was real or not. But what James Smith did was called out all of the bullshit and helped people filter what's actually worth listening to. The second thing that James Smith did that gave him a massive advantage is he wasn't just selling information, he was selling implementation. A lot of creators, especially before AI became such a big thing, were building their careers off just telling you what to do. James went beyond just telling you information. He actually gave you a framework on how to apply it. And this applied to his fitness-based content, and then eventually when he went into his business-focused content. When you've built that kind of trust with an audience through content that delivers positive results and solves problems, when it comes time to launch a product, it's an easy ask because you've already got the reputation for solving those problems. The third advantage was multi-platform consistency. So James didn't just focus on one platform. He went everywhere. He was on YouTube, he was on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, emails, he wrote books, he was everywhere. This was a more extreme version of what Chris Williamson did with the podcast. And I actually would argue, even though his audience is probably net smaller, probably a much higher quality audience than what the Modern Wisdom audience is. Let me explain. The long form content that Chris creates with the podcast is great because it's more effective at building trust more quickly. But James Smith was creating long form content on YouTube, Instagram Reels, TikTok videos, Facebook posts, and also hitting people with emails, books that he was doing, live events. All of this stuff was more and more exposure to his same messaging, his same tone of voice, more opportunities to build that trust with people. So his audience might be smaller in terms of raw following, but the quality of that audience will be much higher because they're constantly exposed to his message more frequently, and he probably has more influence over his audience than Chris does. So those are the approaches that these guys used to build their audiences. But what does that mean for you if you're a business owner trying to use content to make more money? Well, it means you have to change how you think about growth on social media. Most businesses, when they start creating content for social media, are purely focused on growth. And this is important. You need the numbers to be going up. You need reach, you need followers, you need to fill the top of the funnel. Now, the problem comes in when all your focus is on reach and you're not thinking about who you're reaching. And it makes sense that a lot of people get this wrong because the numbers feel good. It feels good when you see views, reach, followers. When you see all those things going up, it feels good for the ego. The trap here though is when you continue to optimize for content that does well based on these metrics, you can start to drift away from the objective, which is ultimately getting more business. See, the key thing to remember, reach and influence are not the same thing. Reach gets you seen. Influence gets you money. And what's good for reach isn't always the same thing that's good for influence. See, reach is a tool. It's not the goal. The ultimate goal should be maximum reach with the people that have problems you have the ability to solve. You're still trying to get growth. You still want views. You still want followers, impressions, all of these things, but you want these things with the right people. You need to move away from thinking about what can I make that will get the most views to thinking about what's the most useful thing I can say to the person who could potentially buy from me. And you make as much of that content as you possibly can. And that's the shift. It's not about how many people I can reach. It's the focus on who are you reaching. Chris Williamson and James Smith didn't build a $60 million product. They built a $60 million audience. The product just gave them a way to sell it. If you want a simple system to this, how to reach the right audience at the top of the funnel, build trust in the middle, and convert at the bottom, I broke that down in this video here, so you can watch that next.